Hawkinson or DK Metcalf or whatever they do. I do think that second-round pick, they could have one of those guys left. If a Dalton Reisner falls there, Cajuste, Cody Ford, any of those guys, one of those guys fall to that spot, I do think that you could see them pounce there if they don't in the first round. But I will be shocked if either the first or second round pick is not an offensive tackle. I will be very, very surprised.
I would agree. I think first or second round they will take a lineman. I just spilled the beans, but a position that I have keyed in on a lot, and I've talked about it a lot. I've debated it a lot, in other conversations I've had with guests. But I feel like the running back position is far more of a need in Buffalo than what people realize. LeSean McCoy kind of on the last legs here. This is probably going to be his last season in Buffalo. It's the last year of his contract, probably his last season here. Chris Ivory, a little bit long in the tooth. Marcus Murphy showed some decent things, but I think he's more of a gadget guy, specific down guy, specific situational running back. What are your thoughts on some of the running backs? I know, that Bryce Love said in an interview today that he visited with Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott. He was doing really well at Stanford up until a knee injury. What are your thoughts on some of the running backs in this year's draft class?
With the Bills team, are you saying that you don't like $12 million being paid to two 31-year-old running backs? You're saying that's not a good thing?
I'm saying that's a pretty bad thing. That's probably as bad as it gets.
It drives me nuts. We actually now have the two oldest running backs under contract in the NFL.
I definitely saw Mike Rodak tweet that, and I'm like, tell me something I don't know. What isn't that kind of stating the obvious? It's like saying Santa Claus is a beard.
Marcus Murphy is seen as this up-and-coming potential new guy. He's 28.
He's 28, right?
Yes. We don't have a running back of the future on the roster. We do not. That guy is not on the Bills.
Which I think is a massive problem. I really do. I think it's just as much a problem. I mean, in terms of how are you going to go about fixing that problem, you're not going to overreach and spend that problem. Depending on who's available, you might, but I just think it's a problem. You got a rookie quarterback, they're a second-year quarterback. He needs that future running back to kind of lean on.
So there's a couple things that I think go into this. It's another thing where I had mentioned in a couple of different spots, this is not a one-year roster overhaul. We're going to have multiple elements of this, multiple pieces where some things are going to be upgraded now. Some things are going to take a minute. Some things are going to be upgraded next offseason. I think running back, you're going to see a combination. I think if you fix the offensive line, we can squeeze one more year of reasonable value out of LeSean McCoy and Chris Ivory, along with a rookie running back. And I'll get to some of the guys I like there in a moment. Then both of their contracts are up. You let them walk in 2019.
You still there? I think we lost him. We lost him last time, too. We lost Brandon Cook last time. Let's see what the heck happened here. We'll call him back. Let's give Greg. Greg, you there? Now we lost him. Greg Tompsett of Cover One Sports. Cover One Sports, cover1.net, I should say. Let's try to get him back on here. Yeah, for some reason it didn't stay on. There you are. All right, okay. So where were we?
No, I was just getting started on the running back topic. You can, if you want to cut it and splice it.
Oh, no, you're good.
Start on that again.
You can keep going.
Okay. All right, so with the running back position, I think it's interesting because you have a tough spot where we have the oldest running back position in the NFL. You have guys coming in that are going to be expensive, but it's not something you have to fix all at once, because I think if we fix the offensive line, you can get one more year of production and squeeze that out of LeSean McCoy and Chris Ivory. If we bring in a mid-round running back, and I'll get to a couple of those prospects in a minute, then I think you let both of their contracts expire, and you do the same thing in 2020. You let another mid-round running back come in, and then that starts the cycle of how I would manage the modern NFL running back, which is every other year just draft a mid-round pick, third, fourth, fifth round, pick the best guy that's left, and just keep adding them every other year and let the other guy walk, and you never pay more than a mid-round running back contract, and you don't pay second contracts. You just keep recycling them over and over again, and you keep replacing them because it's the most replaceable position in the NFL. So that's what I would do. Now, doing that this year, I think you have a great group of people that you can go to. You have the two guys out of Alabama with Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris. You have David Montgomery out of Iowa State. You have Dexter Williams out of Notre Dame. You have Darrell Henderson out of Nevada. You have Devine Ozigbo out of Nebraska. I don't even care which guy they pick. Just take the last one that you like that's in that tier that's available with our early fifth-round pick. Just snag that guy, let him play behind Shady and Ivory this year, then he can take over a bigger role, and then you pick another one next year. It's such a replaceable position in the NFL nowadays that I don't want to see money spent on it. I go crazy when people start talking about, oh, we should go out and sign Le'Veon Bell or Mark Ingram or whoever. I don't want to spend another dollar on a running back because I'm tired of watching other teams draft Kareem Hunt in the third round and then have him go out and replace him with your undrafted free agent Damian Williams that you picked up for nothing, or that, hey, we drafted third-round pick Royce Freeman and he ends up getting beaten out by undrafted free agent Phillip Lindsay, and just all these mid-round grade guys that you don't have to spend big picks on them. And I know Saquon Barkley and Todd Gurley and Zeke Elliott are fun, but I would rather use a top 10 pick on a premium position and then be happy with my mid-round, later guy that can still be really talented.
And the Todd Gurleys and the Saquon Barkleys and the Christian McCaffreys, those are truly, I mean, those are rare specimens. Those are the elite of the elite. Those guys can do a lot of different things that most running backs can't do. So taking one of those guys, you're taking one of those guys for a great reason, but there's not one of those guys in this class either.
Yeah, absolutely not. That's not there this year, and I haven't looked to see if that's in the offing for the 2020 draft. But again, that's not where I want to spend my big money.
Right.
That's not where I want to spend my premium picks. I'm happy to not have that kind of superstar guy because I think you can still have, I know it's an assurance to take those guys, but the Saints aren't mad about Alvin Kamara.
No, they're not.
You can find superstar guys who are not top 10 picks, and I just think that the drop off is so minimal that I'd rather minimize that cost and manage it more effectively.
Oddly enough, too, you see those teams like the Rams and the Panthers and Dallas. They already had a lot of those boxes checked off that Buffalo does not have checked off yet. Dallas was building their line, years prior to that. The Rams had really they kind of started their rebuild with Todd Gurley and then built around him, getting Goff and getting the wide receivers for Goff and everything. But those teams situationally were in a lot of different we're in a much better, cozier position to take a running back in the first round than Buffalo was, oddly enough.
Yeah, it's a luxury pick in my mind, and we're just not in that phase of our roster build. I could see that being something that maybe is possible, maybe in 2021. Let us build the line this year, and next year let us build all those pieces around it, and then maybe, in the 2021 draft, we can afford to have a luxury of just a top-end running back talent like that, but we're just not in that position right now.
What are your thoughts on Tremaine Edmonds' rookie season? I saw a lot of things I liked, and there were some things, you got to look with a subjective eye that I didn't necessarily like, and some of those things that I didn't like mostly stemmed from the fact that the defense was kind of a hodgepodge group here and there throughout the season due to injury and stuff like that. But what were your thoughts on Tremaine Edmonds this season, his rookie year?
I think that he's exactly what you would have expected from the youngest linebacker in NFL history.
Right.
He showed phenomenal potential. He struggled early in the year with over-aggressiveness and the, frequency of getting caught by play-action runs or getting caught by, run fakes and those kind of things and get caught up in the mess there. And then later in the year, he would learn and he wouldn't get caught again. And later in the year, he would, learn from it and not have it come up a second time. And by the end of the season, he was starting to make some dominant plays and letting his athleticism really work for him. And he's one of those guys that we are going to benefit so much that when we sign him to his second extension, his second contract and extend him, he's going to be playing still from age 24 to 28. And is going to be just phenomenal that we're going to benefit so much of having those first 5 years where he was drafted at 19 and being able to go through that route. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to be able to see what he does from it because the progress he showed during the season was really promising. And I think we're going to see more of that coming into his second year. The
biggest takeaway for me of Edmonds' rookie year was his instincts. You started to see the instincts start to change. As you said, early on in the season, he was over-aggressive, but then there'd be moments where you would see him make a read on a play and just barrel tackle the the opposing player, and that definitely excites me. The offense is what I really love a lot. I love looking at formations, and I feel like it's such an offensive league now that it's pretty fun to dissect that. But having a true middle linebacker that can cover, that can also tackle, that can also run sideline to sideline like he can, that's going to be exciting for Bills fans for a long time. I don't think we've had that in quite a while.
No. I mean, the potential that last year we picked our quarterback and our quarterback of our defense all at once is just so unbelievable. It's something that, we could look back on years from now, and that could be the moment that kind of restarted everything.
Really, these last two drafts, whether it was McDermott, I would say more McDermott because Doug Whaley was kind of being pushed out the door, and Brandon Beane. You look at the last two drafts; these last two drafts have been better in terms of getting starters than Doug Whaley's 4 drafts combined, I'd say.
Oh yeah. I mean, just looking at the combination of, Trey, Milano, Zay Jones, Deion Dawkins, and then getting into the
showed. That you could work with talent-wise, things that you could work with talent-wise with him that might, like you said, 2-3 years from now, he could be pretty good if he does the things that he needs to do in order to get better. But one topic that I kind of wanted to shift gears here, and I really enjoyed your takes on some of the questions that I have in terms of the Buffalo Bills. I'm excited. I honestly have to say, like in closing of the Buffalo Bills and shifting gears here on another topic, but I know that I've witnessed some really bad regimes here in Buffalo. I've witnessed some really bad drafting. I remember being, not to date myself, I was in high school. I remember when they drafted Leotis McKelvin with the 12th overall pick, and I thought, oh my Lord, this is not good. But Aaron Maben, C.J. Spiller when they had Marshawn and Fred Jackson, and Terrell Troop, I go on and on. But anywho, what are if you're really looking at the future, what excites you the most about the Buffalo Bills' future? I know we kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you were to single out one thing that gets you really excited for the Bills' future.
I really think it is that front office setup, the fact that I think we have smart people that we can really trust making these decisions. And it doesn't mean that every decision is the right decision. It just means that we can finally feel good that they have a process in place, that they're trying to consistently add the right people, and that they're going to stack up those right decisions on top of right decisions on top of right decisions, and that's going to net out to the right thing in the long run. So, I think that front office model, and if they pick the right quarterback, and I do genuinely think that they have, I think that we could be in line for an exciting 10-year run here.
Do you think playoffs are possible in 2019?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the fact that McDermott got 6 wins out of the roster they had last year was a minor miracle.
I would say so as well.
and I think that the fact that we're bringing back virtually every starter that we want, plus 10 draft picks and $80 million in cap space to make upgrades, I think that we're going to see some material improvements that are going to allow us to, I think 8 to 10 wins is right there in competition for a playoff spot. And if things fall right, they absolutely could be right there in the hunt.
I couldn't agree more. And people say, what are your expectations? And I say my expectations are high, but I think they're high but realistic based on a lot of evidence that we've seen these last couple years, especially with the drafting and the things that we've talked about. But one thing that I wanted to bring to your attention was I'm pretty sure you're a mixed martial arts fan. Am I right?
Yeah, I am. A big fan of UFC. I wrestled all of my life and worked with a lot of different guys. I actually had the good fortune of when I went to states in wrestling in high school, and one of the guys I worked out with my junior year that I went to states was Rashad Evans.
Oh, wow.
Got to know him and roomed with him at states and got to know him real well. So it was exciting to see kind of that group of people come up at the time, and now I've just kind of carried that on. So I really enjoy it.
I've met Rashad Evans on 3 or 4 separate occasions, and 2 of which were UFC related, 2 of which were completely, totally random. And he was actually the first UFC fighter that I met in person. And at the time, I was a high school kid. I was working at Tops Markets, and this guy comes through my line, and this is when he's on top of the world at this point. I believe he was actually, you know what? He was just about to fight John Jones at this point. And he comes through my line, and I was like, that's Rashad. I said it under my breath. I was like, that's Rashad Evans. And normally I'm not a starstruck guy or anything like that, but the fact that he was buying Twisted Tea and he showed me his ID that said that he was Rashad Evans, that was pretty cool. And then
he's a good guy.
Yeah, and then I was actually working at the arena during the UFC 210, and he was in town for that, and he was scheduled to fight in another event prior to that, and I'm like, man, why weren't you fighting here? And he was like, I don't know, I tried, but they wouldn't. They already had me booked for another card. I'm like, man, I wanted to see you fight. And we talked about wrestling, and I had the same wrestling coach as he did at Niagara County Community College and junior college wrestling, and we talked about that. And he's just an awesome dude. He is just consummate professional as a person.
Absolutely. No, it's exciting to see people, get a chance to make it from Western New York. I was excited to see people succeed.
Right. And I mean, he is still, even outside of fighting now that he's retired, he's one of those few guys that I genuinely hoped would remain a fixture in the sport, because he's just such a smart, educated, soft-spoken, well-spoken guy that I'm glad that he's doing the commentating, the analyst work that he's doing, and I'm glad that he's training fighters. He's got a big fighter fighting this Saturday night, actually, Kamaru Usman, and he's challenging Tyron Woodley for the welterweight title.
Woodley's no joke. That's going to be all that he's got. But in the UFC, there's no such thing as a favorite in my mind. Anybody can get caught on any day. So if he's good enough to get put in the octagon with him, he's got a shot.
Right. That's a really great point. In mixed martial arts, there's no scheme or anything like that like there is in football. You could throw one punch or one takedown, and if you keep a guy down, that's all it takes.
Yeah, guys of that caliber, if you're good enough to be in the ring there, you're good enough to walk out a winner. There's no such thing as a heavy favorite in the UFC. Right.
What are your thoughts? I mean, as far as your UFC fandom, who have been your favorite fighters and stuff like that you've really rooted for?
I was a huge fan of Stipe Miocic. Really liked, his run up and went through that whole. I like the wrestlers just coming from my background, so I love Cain Velasquez. I love some of the guys that came up there. I was a bigger guy, so I wrestled heavyweight. So I always kind of gravitated towards that world. But really, anyone who's skilled, it's hard not to watch, the George St. Pierre and guys like that just announcing his retirement, and not be impressed and respect of how good they are and how tactical they are at what they do. And even someone who has obviously had his rough stretch of things here, but seeing John Jones get a chance to come back here and try to clean up his name, someone who is just so unbelievably talented, I can watch any good fight and be able to enjoy it.
There's a name that you mentioned in there that there was. Well, you actually didn't mention a name, but I'm planning on doing a podcast on certain sports athletes that have a tough time after their careers. And one guy that I think is the greatest, arguably the greatest wrestler turned mixed martial artist, probably the first true real champ that the UFC has ever seen, was Matt Hughes. And he's had a lot of kind of dark times post his fight career. There was the accident with the train accident. And then there was a recent story that came out about a restraining order from his wife and his twin brother. I feel like in fighting more than any other sport, whether it's boxing or MMA or whether it's football or baseball, you get attached to these fighters because you learn their life story before they were a great champ, after they were a great champ, and it's tough to see some fighters not always go out on top like George St. Pierre did, or probably eventually like a John Jones will. What are your thoughts on just some of the fighters that you've looked at and thought, maybe they stayed in it too long, or maybe they retired too early? Do you have any examples of that?
It's a rough sport because it's so heavily based on the ultimate just adrenaline rush and ultra confidence in yourself to be the baddest man alive when you walk in there. That's really hard to turn off, and it's really hard for guys who reach that pinnacle to then tell themselves that, I don't have to do this anymore, and not to have to find out the hard way. And you end up looking at some really sad situations that it was rough to watch the late fights of Chuck Liddell and Mike Hunt or Tito Ortiz and guys like that just couldn't say no and walk away, and then, God forbid, are going to walk around like some of the punch-drunk 70s boxers that you see that just don't have it, mentally anymore. So I wish there was a better way to do that, but sadly, I think that it's kind of hand in hand because you can't get into that world without having that ultra self-confidence, that being able to get to that point and then turn it off is just not a skill set that easily goes together.
There was a great line that arguably the greatest trash talker in MMA history, at least, ever said, and Chael Sonnen, he said, you either end up on your face or on your back. There's very seldom times where you walk out of a combat sport like a Lennox Lewis or a George St. Pierre where you get to walk out on top with the majority of your brain cells still intact, where you can make a difference in another avenue. And then there's guys like Chuck Liddell, like Matt Hughes, that they're true fighters. That's all they know. That's all they ever wanted to do. And before they know it, the clock stops ticking and their fight career is over. And they have a tough time transitioning. I feel like there needs to be more awareness brought on those facts with athletes. I wish that there was some sort of a contingency plan for athletes, that not every athlete that has ever fought in the UFC is like a Rashad Evans, where you could be a Ultimate Fighter winner and a world champ and can walk out of the octagon with your head held high and can kind of say to yourself, well, I have another fallback plan. Not every fighter has that. You watch these fighters for so long, and then you see them go that route of having such a tough time transitioning. It's really sad to see that.
Yeah, it's a thankless life, and that I'm happy to be able to watch it and enjoy it. But sometimes it does get difficult knowing what these guys deal with after the fact.
Right, and the punishment that they put themselves through and everything like that. As far as the guy that I refer to as the GOAT, the greatest of all time, for those of you that do not know what that means, the GOAT means greatest of all time. My greatest of all time, I talked about it on one of my last podcast episodes, was George St. Pierre. My opinion, he's the best ever. I don't see anybody eclipsing him. Maybe John Jones, if he can kind of right the ship and clear his name a little bit and get back into the good graces of some of his fans that he's lost. But George St. Pierre never put himself in that position. He was always the consummate professional. What are your thoughts on George St. Pierre's career?
I think it's hard to argue with. I think that he's really been so technically sound and so good, and that even any losses were so close and so careful that someone that I think could have had that argument is maybe Anderson Silva early on.
Right.
And that, some of those rough losses here at the end have kind of brought some of that into question. So I think that it's hard to argue that the culmination of the whole career, I think it's tough to debate anyone who had a better resume than what St. Pierre put together.
As far as the losses, too, like with George St. Pierre, I recently just watched the first Matt Hughes fight for the first time, and he lost that fight with 4 minutes and 59 seconds into the first round. Had he not tapped, that round would have ended, and who knows what would have happened in that fight. So he was 1 second away from winning that fight. It's so crazy. I forgot that fact, but rewatching that fight, it was crazy. Anderson Silva, though, I would agree. He would be a guy that would be kind of on the short list, but one of the weird things about Anderson Silva, and I talked about this with another MMA writer on the podcast before, is that Anderson Silva seems like he hates the process of a fight. He hates to exchange. He hates to kind of look an opponent down. He wants to exchange immediately, and that's why he would do those taunting things, and that's why he would go the route of trying to make an opponent strike. That way he could counter and just make them look completely stupid. What do you say to that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's why he was such an entertaining fighter, and that it was exciting to be able to see that. But yeah, it also got him into trouble at the end when he didn't have that ultimate skill set any longer. But it's why he was such a fun fighter to watch.
I feel like for me, NFL football, I love the Sabres and I love baseball, but MMA is just it really. I don't think I've ever found a sport that I've loved as much as football and mixed martial arts. And I wrestled in high school and a little bit in college too. And I always gravitate to the wrestlers. It's like you appreciate what they do in that arena, in that octagon more, because you know what brought them there.
Yeah, you know what kind of work went into it.
Right. Well, I really appreciate the time that you've given, to the show tonight. I really appreciate having you on, Greg, and we'll definitely have to do it again.
Absolutely. This is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it, man.
Yeah, definitely. I'll be in touch, and we'll get you back on the podcast soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for everything you do, Ryan. Love your work, and looking forward to seeing more in the future.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great night.
All right. Thanks, man.
Take care. Greg Tompsett of Cover One Sports. Man, that was fun. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed talking the MMA stuff too. That was a good time. Really, that is the best part of this podcast, is the idea that you have the ability to not only promote yourself, but you have the ability to promote others. And Greg and Eric Turner do a fantastic job at Cover One. I would suggest anyone that is looking for any sort of analytics or different intricate information that I don't think many people offer, whether it's Cover One or compared to any other entity. I feel like Cover One kind of is on its own, as its own entity, and I really appreciate the work that they do. I had Kyle Trimble on. I had Greg Tompsett on. Next up will be Matt Perino of UpstateNewYork.com. I believe that is the name of the site, and if I botched it, my apologies, Matt. But Matt will be on. We'll be talking some Buffalo Bills. We'll be talking about Matt's career and the journey that he's had, and I really look forward to that. I've really enjoyed having these guests on the podcast. It's been a true pleasure for me, a true honor for me to be joined by Kyle Trimble, Brandon Cook, Greg Tompsett. I believe the original post, I put his name with an H, and it's Tompsett. My apologies to Greg spelling his name wrong. I just assumed it was Tom like Thomas or Tom like Thompson. My bad on that. But I'll try to edit that as best as I can. Really appreciate all the time that these guests have given me, and I couldn't agree more with Greg's assessment on the Buffalo Bills as far as the offensive line. Jonah Williams, a prospect that I believe is just so overly criticized. I find it to be very annoying, very frustrating. Juwan Taylor, a guy that I really like as well. Greg holds out the belief that Buffalo could go with one of those two tackles in this instance, in this draft. I wouldn't be opposed to it. It wouldn't bother me. I mean, their offensive line was so atrocious last year. It was just so abysmal that you really wonder what direction they're going to go in as far as that offensive line. Are they going to go draft? Are they going to go free agency? And Greg and I can speak to this as well. I believe they're going to go after both. I think they're going to go both options. But you have to admire the fact that not only have these guests that have come on the show given their take, but they have kind of put their own spin on it of what they would want. You know, I've talked with all three of these gentlemen this last week about what has taken place and this season compared to last season. What do you expect? And they're keeping it real. Their expectations are pretty high. They believe that the Bills can win 8, 9, 10 games. And I don't think those are high expectations. I think those are realistic expectations based on some of the moves that we've seen these last couple of years. And given that they did win 6 games in 2018, I think that's, as Greg said, a miracle that they were able to win this many games. Really appreciated his take on the running back scenario as well. I have no idea what they're going to do with LaShawn McCoy. If it were up to me, man, I might cut him. I'm 50-50 on it. I think, as to what Greg said, he's basically stated that if you can get the offensive line fortified and retooled just a little bit, that LaShawn, you could really squeeze some juice out of LaShawn this year. I would agree with that. I think their line was awful, and I thought that McCoy made the best season out of it that he could, really. And maybe he'd do better if they had some younger, fresher, stronger, just all-around better linemen. I don't think that's a maybe. I think that's a definite. But nonetheless, I'm Ryan Thomas. It was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It's split up in a couple different parts. I talked with Greg Tompsett of Cover1.net. Very excited. I got 2 of the 3. I'm going to try to go 3 for 3, maybe 4 for 4. Maybe we can try to get Eric Turner and or Nate Geary on. I think I can make that happen. I think that's possible. I'm pretty good at making stuff happen. That's pretty much what I do, is just make stuff happen constantly. I got Greg on. I'll get Eric. You know, Anthony Chandra, I know he's out there. I know he's a big listener and big viewer of the show. We'll get him on as well. Talk some hockey. Because right now we're in the middle of a playoff race. Maybe. Anyways, I'm Ryan Thomas. That was the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Go Bills.